Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm looking at the 1988 X-Men event story, Fall of the Mutants. And I want to make more of a point of emphasizing the creative teams that actually worked on these comics, so here's that information as well. Ta-da! In the 1980s, X-Men comics were the comics. This was largely thanks to the work of writer Chris Claremont and artists like John Byrne, who had together made some of the biggest X-Men stories like the Phoenix Saga and Days of Future Past. During those stories, Jean Grey would die for the first of many times, and Cyclops, in grief, would quit the X-Men, leaving the team without any of its original members for really the first solid time since it began. Other than that brief period where a new team was formed to rescue the original team from Krakoa, the living island. Yeah, that's a thing. Following this, Cyclops met a woman named Madeline Pryor, who conveniently looked exactly like Jean Grey, but without all the baggage of mutant powers and Phoenix forces and etc, etc. And he would eventually fall in love with her and marry her, and they would have a child together who they would name Nathan Christopher. You might know him better as Cable. Yes, I did want an excuse to show that picture again. Come on, he's wearing a baby sling. How is that not the best thing ever? Where was I? Oh, right. The X-Men, meanwhile, had a big change as Professor Xavier invited a supposedly reformed Magneto in to teach a new generation of students, the first group of new mutants, as the regular X-Men were all grown up by this point. And the X-Men too would change during this time. With Cyclops gone, Storm would be promoted as team leader, a move that today would have thousands whining about wokeness and canceling comic subscriptions, but somehow in the 80s was not only accepted, but X-Men sales would continue to rise afterwards. Curious. The team's lineup would continue to change too, with Rogue, a former member of Mystique's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, joining the team, as well as Cyclops' brother Havoc, the luck-manipulating Longshot, the pop star Dazzler, and the telepath Psylocke. But with sales continuing to grow, demand for still another X title would as well, so X-Factor, a team comprised of all the original X-Men, was created. To achieve the goal of putting the band back together, Marvel first had to free them from their current status quo. Status quos? This meant killing all the members of the Defenders that weren't Beast, Angel, or Iceman, bringing Jean Grey magically back to life, and having Cyclops, upon learning that Jean was alive again, simply dropping his wife and baby like they were hot. Madeline and Nathan would be attacked by Mr. Sinister's marauders, causing Cyclops to think, when he finally checked back in on them, that they were dead. Maybe you shouldn't have randomly walked out on them, huh? But they weren't dead, and Madeline would actually be rescued by the X-Men and start hanging out with them all the time. X-Factor, meanwhile, under the urging of Cameron Hodge, would go on to pretend to be humans that hunted mutants that they would then secretly take and start training. This public image would just lead to more anti-mutant hatred though, and eventually the clearly not so bright team would realize that Hodge himself hated mutants. And not only that, but he actually led a militant anti-mutant group called the Right, which had those creepy smiley face guys as their soldiers. A lot of these plots would come to a head in the first big crossover X-Men event called Mutant Massacre, where Angel would have his wings cut off and later die in a plane explosion, and Colossus, Kitty Pryde, and Nightcrawler would be injured so bad that they would be benched until they could recover. The Mutant Massacre was such a success sales-wise that Marvel demanded another crossover event, which they didn't really get with Fall of the Mutants, despite it being billed as one. But that's still what we're looking at today, so let's finally get to that and take this away. The comic opens on some art. I mean, you probably guessed that, but this is diegetic art, being drawn by Peter Rasputin, aka Colossus, as he recaps the events of X-Men number 218. Though the art here is actually really being done by, hey, look at that, Mark Silvestri. Remember last week when I said he was a longtime X-Men veteran? Well, there you go. Proof. A bunch of kids who speak with some pretty bad and inconsistent accent dialogue come to check out what Colossus is up to, and Claremont very accurately predicts internet trolls by having one of them whine that the team has too many women on it these days. In their defense, Pete's all like, well, there are still dudes to appreciate, like, I don't know, this Colossus guy for example. I have it on pretty good authority that he is neat. The kids then almost come to blows as they argue about whether mutants are good or evil, prompting Colossus to intervene and spit some truths about race and racism. Tell it like it is, Tovarish. A strange woman shows up and asks Colossus to draw her, leaving him a Colossus-shaped Oscar as payment. Aw, she likes you. She really likes you. And hey, whoa, watch your language there, Petey. Those words would definitely have to be @%, #money sign, exclamation pointed out if they were in English. Nice way to get around that censorship, I guess. I like to imagine Claremont went out of his way to learn Russian swear words just for the specific purpose of getting around the Comic Code Authority. You sly devil, you. What Colossus draws, though, isn't the woman he sees, but an entirely different one. Mysterious. Her presence and her equally mysterious disappearance leaves Colossus worrying that his teammates are in danger, and so he calls up his little sister, Ilyana Rasputin, the new mutant named Magic, who teleports him back to his friends who are currently in... Wait a minute, that's Dallas! They're in Dallas? Awesome! Honestly, that's a pretty impressive likeness for pre-Google days. It's even got Reunion Tower up there. The reason the X-Men are in Dallas is to investigate the disappearance of Storm and Forge from Forge's workshop, Eagle Plaza. The pair, who had been a couple leading up to this, have disappeared from our world entirely and into a new world empty of human and mutant influence alike. This happened after a being called the Adversary tricked Storm into believing that Forge was trying to destroy the world when he was actually trying to save it, and they fell through a dimensional gateway together. The X-Men are unaware of this though, and don't get the chance to find out because they're interrupted by the appearance of Mystique and her Freedom Force. The Freedom Force is basically just a new version of Mystique's version of the Brotherhood, but now officially sanctioned by the government to hunt mutants following the passage of the Mutant Registration Act that required mutants to register their identities and powers with the government. The fight between the two groups is pretty brief, the most notable part being that the Blob just flat out sits on Wolverine, cause fat jokes are hilarious. Until Wolvie finally manages to maneuver enough to poke him with his claws, sending Blob from a seated position, mind you, seated, sending Blob jumping straight up into the air. And he stays up there long enough for Colossus to casually step out of a portal, have Blob recognize and comment on his appearance, and then have Colossus say a snarky line before punching him. Whammo! How freaking high can Blob jump? And from sitting, even. Is this an additional Blob superpower we never knew about? Both groups of mutants are essentially here in the first place because Destiny, Mystique's unstated romantic partner, had a vision of the X-Men where they were all in love with dying. They were doing it in Texas. And that vision starts to seem like it's going to come true when a rift in the sky just opens up for no reason and sunlight comes pouring through in the middle of the night. We then find ourselves stuck in the middle of a Doctor Who episode, or the midsection of Crisis on Infinite Earths, as all time on Earth seems to blend together into one time right there in downtown Dallas. Which is why we suddenly find dinosaurs wandering through the Galleria Mall, giving us some great moments of Texans in trouble like this. Get up, Jim Bob, stop fooling around, boy, you gotta run, now! I can't, sissy, I hurt my leg, leave me, save yourself! At least, that's how I imagine the accents are meant to sound. I don't know anyone who actually talks like that, and I've certainly never met a single person named Jim Bob. But otherwise, yeah, totally accurate depiction, A+. To save the civilians, Pyro burns the freaking T-Rex to his bones. What the hell, man? Why would you do that? Don't you know kids love dinosaurs? You're an evil man. We also have this moment where some time-displaced Cheyenne warriors ride down to meet with some of the Freedom Force members, wanting to lend their aid to the dilemma, and some Texans, spotting the Indians, since this wasn't the 90s yet, decide to just shoot the Redskins all dead. Yeah, that tracks actually. Crimson Commando of Freedom Force pauses to lament whether human beings are even worth saving in light of actions like that, and that's actually a pretty powerful line considering that up to this point, the Freedom Force have basically been pretty much the villains of X-Men comics. Meanwhile, Eagle Plaza turns into a Vietnamese jungle where Forge had lost his hand and leg during the war. This prompts the X-Men to go inside to investigate what's going on, leading them to discover that what's happening is an eternal battle between the Adversary, that guy I mentioned earlier that trapped Storm and Forge in another dimension, and the goddess Roma, the woman that Colossus unintentionally drew at the beginning of the story. To fight the adversary, Roma recruits champions, and she has chosen the X-Men to be her latest, particularly Storm and Forge. Forge, as a member of the Cheyenne tribe, had already been trained his whole life to fight the adversary, as apparently that's something that tribe does, every generation, I guess. You know, I appreciate the general wokeness of Claremont in terms of Native American representation and lamenting their massacre, but it's still disappointing to see these classical depictions of Native Americans in the whole "they're mystic just because they are" nonsense. Baby steps. Baby steps. Forge had removed Storm's mutant powers with a device he had built, but using his own robotic leg, he creates a new device that restores her powers and allows them to return to their world. Once they're back, we learn that this whole problem was created by Forge to begin with. While serving in the Vietnam War, he had grown so disillusioned that he used the souls of his recently killed squad mates to power a spell that opened a portal to a dimension full of demons. And it also happened to be the prison of the adversary. When Forge and Storm return to the normal world, they leave open the portal behind them, and the X-Men try to use their combined powers to push the adversary back through the portal, but they have no effect. So Forge is forced to cast the spell once again, this time using the souls of the X-Men, willingly given for this cause, to force the adversary back into his prison and seal the portal. The X-Men's heroics are caught on camera for all the world to see by an NPR crew. Though, come on, NPR? These two are way too much action hero types for NPR. I mean, they're running around, getting into dangerous situations, and firing guns? NPR must have been really different in the 80s. But the X-Men don't really die here. For their bravery, Roma restores them to life, offering them the chance to still appear dead to the rest of the world, which they agree to in order to protect their loved ones and continue to operate in secret. Meanwhile, their heroic sacrifice begins to change some opinions on mutants for those who watch the events unfolding live, and leaves Kitty and Nightcrawler out of the team as they, too, are left to believe the X-Men are dead. That moves us on to the New Mutants, which currently consist of Mirage, Cannonball, Wolfsbane, Magic, and Cypher. Sunspot and Warlock also rejoined the team during this arc, though they had been away for a while as part of a team called the Fallen Angels. The teens have run away from the X-Mansion and their teacher Magneto in order to head to an island of mutated animal people on the prompting of their new friend, Birdbrain. Birdbrain, which seems like kind of a mean name, but you know, okay, was a creature created by this guy calling himself the Animator, who is just some random mad scientist that wants to splice humans with animals for whatever reason. You know, mad scientist reasons. So Animator makes an entire Dr. Moreau island of mutant creatures, and he's not very nice to them, which is what prompted Birdbrain to run away in the first place. Now that he's met superpowered heroes in the New Mutants, Birdbrain has brought them to the island in order to help him free his Animorph friends. When the Annie people are fully grown, Animator tests how well they've turned out by having them run through a gauntlet filled with tests and traps, which most of them don't survive. And in order to help the creatures, the New Mutants are forced to go through the gauntlet as well, causing Douglas Ramsey, aka Cypher, to nearly fall into a pit of spikes. Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much, Birdbrain. I have it on good authority that Ramsey's only weakness is bullets. Haha, yeah, love that image. The New Mutants fail the gauntlet themselves, though, and get captured. Here we learn that Animator works for Cameron Hodge in the right, who wanted him to discover a way to halt and even reverse mutations. But instead, Animator decided to work on personal projects. Like you do. But during a phone call between Animator and Hodge, Cameron can tell something is suspicious about the way Animator is acting, so he decides to pay him a little visit. Realizing this is going to happen, Animator decides to just blow up the base so he can start again elsewhere. He orders his mutates to kill the heroes, but Cypher, using his mutant ability to instantly learn languages, which Man, I wish I had that ability. Manages to convince the mutates that Animator is just going to kill them too. When they realize he's right, they drop the weird test tube containment pods that the team was trapped in, giving them the chance to free themselves and for Cypher to speak computer, as they say, and shut down the base's auto-destruct. It's all for nothing though, as Hodge shows up right then with his creepy smiley face men and shoots them all dead. Wow, that was dark. Oh, they were just shooting tranquilizers. Of course they were. Hodge has the New Mutants captured and taken to his ship, while the rest of his men hunt down Animator's Ani-Men. But the mutants manage to get free and intervene for the lives of the animal people, turning the fight against the right. But Animator grows a spine and decides to involve himself in the fight, and in order to prevent Wolfsbane from being killed, Cypher jumps in front of the bullet. He collapses to the ground unnoticed by the rest of the heroes, who go on to finish off the fight, assuming Cypher has nothing worse than a flesh wound. But when they get back to him, they find that, wait, he's dead? Like, really dead? Like dead? Oh shit. You mean bullets really were his only weakness? Wait, so when you said that flippantly, Wolverine, you were actually referring to a specific thing? You fucked up, Wolvie. You real fucked up. Damn. What's also pretty fucked up is just how bright and happy the cover for the next issue immediately after this is. Like, what? Look how happy they look. They're like, thank God that Cypher guy is gone, now we can really party. The surviving New Mutants take Dougie's body home, where they learn about Magic's brother and the rest of the X-Men dying in Dallas. Magic and Magneto then have it out over how terrible of a teacher Magneto has been and how terrible of students the New Mutants have been, and Magic is so upset she starts turning into her demon form, something we'll see a lot more of in the future Inferno crossover. To recover from their woes, the students all decide to dress up in new costumes, deciding to declare themselves as the new X-Men, since the old X-Men are apparently dead, and we move on to the final story featuring X-Factor. X-Factor had vanished mysteriously at the end of their previous issue, not collected here, because they were being teleported where we find them now on Apocalypse's ship, facing off against Apocalypse and his Horsemen War, Famine, and Pestilence, all of whom had been showing up here and there in previous X-Factor issues. Perhaps because of that, X-Factor seems pretty ready to handle them, defeating the three horsemen with relative ease. But Apocalypse has a surprise up his sleeve, his final horseman, Death. This Archangel of Death is actually none other than the previously assumed dead Warren Worthington III, better known as Angel. Apocalypse has done to him what he does to other mutants to modify and warp them, to convert them into a more powerful version of themselves. So now he has new wings, metal ones this time, that can shoot out deadly razor blades, and he has blue skin. Because it looked cooler, I guess. The heroes are so surprised to see their friend alive that they're unable to fight back and are easily defeated by Death and captured by Apocalypse, who then unleashes his four horsemen on the city below, having them destroy it to prepare to rebuild it. But X-Factor manages to get free, and Cyclops and Jean head down to the city to try and stop the horsemen. Although most of those fights are actually resolved in issues of Power Pack and Captain America for no apparent reason. I guess the crossover they already had going on between the three X titles just wasn't enough? Beast and Iceman stay up in Apocalypse's ship to try and stop him, but Beast is at a severe disadvantage seeing as he's recently been touched by Pestilence, which infected him with a virus that increased his strength, but whenever he uses that strength, he loses intelligence. This lowered intelligence causes him to act out of anger, throwing a giant machine at Apocalypse that the big boss simply teleports away from. An intentional trick to get Beast to smash both the cloaking device that had been hiding the ship from sight from people below, and the stabilizer that kept it floating in place. So now out of control, the ship smashes into several different buildings and even takes the antenna off of the Empire State Building, and I'm almost surprised the Twin Towers didn't also come under threat, although maybe that was removed in reprints since 2001. like so many other things. Inside the spiraling out of control ship, X-Factor focuses on winning Angel back to their side. He's clearly morally split between Apocalypse's agenda and his own history, so to shake him awake, Iceman makes an ice copy of himself, or snow clone if you will, that Archangel smashes through and then has an unintentionally hilarious reaction. Like, what did you think was gonna happen, dude? Thinking he's killed his old friend, Angel turns on Apocalypse in anger, but Apocalypse simply takes his remaining horsemen, and Caliban, who had been staying with X-Factor since the Mutant Massacre and will later return as one of Apocalypse's horsemen, and just nopes on out of there before the ship finishes crashing. While the ship nearly takes out the Statue of Liberty, the only thing it actually fully destroys is X-Factor headquarters, so without a home, X-Factor decides to just keep Apocalypse's base. I'm sure it's totally not filled with creepy ways for him to monitor you and everything you do, plus all kinds of dangerous equipment and things that shouldn't be left lying around unmonitored. Yeah, totally. Just leave that thing right there. The police want to take X-Factor into custody, but the heroes ignore that in order to go around the city helping rebuild parts of the city that were destroyed and rescue people that were injured during the attack. News reporter Trish Tilby, who has started to be and will remain a longtime love interest of Beast, runs into Beast to see him now little more than an upset child mentally, devastated at the part he unintentionally played in the destruction of the city. But between their heroics around the city and the events of what the X-Men did down in Dallas, feelings towards mutants have had a rapid overnight shift, especially toward X-Factor, as their faces have been pasted all over TV and radio. Not sure how you paste faces on the radio, but hey, I'm sure that cop is totally a very smart guy. Conveniently, as part of this attitude shift, a local tailor/designer thanks X-Factor with some new costumes so they don't have to wear their mutant hunter uniforms anymore. In the city even throws X-Factor a ticker tape parade. Is it me, or does it look like a certain Parker, Peter makes an unstated cameo at the parade? I guess we'll never know. But what we do know is it's time for the breakdown. Mostly when I see people talk about major X-Men events, it seems like it's always, Phoenix Saga, Days of Future Past, Inferno, Age of Apocalypse, Onslaught, one of the Messiah stories, or some other big event. And yeah, those are all important stories too, but I feel like I never really see this one mentioned, and that's kind of a shame. Maybe it's because despite being billed as a crossover, it's not connected really at all, unlike Mutant Massacre before this and Inferno, which would come right after this. Its impact is maybe a bit understated too. This was an attempt to start changing public opinion towards mutants that obviously didn't last, and stuff like the X-Men being dead barely made itself felt on the history of the series, especially since, they weren't actually dead. Stuff that did have major impact, like Angel becoming Archangel and Douglas Ramsey dying, would eventually be things that got reversed. So, yeah, I get it. But despite the maybe underwhelming impact, I love how much this story explores cultural perceptions of those that are different, even if that can be problematic, like the depictions of Native Americans and the Vietnamese. Although I do appreciate how it recognizes that both groups, despite typically being villainized in our stories and media, are comprised of people that are actually people as well. I also love how it's been so much time really delving into the personal of who these characters are, and honestly I feel it's some of the best writing I've seen from Chris Claremont and Louise Simonson, especially in comparison to Inferno, which I do not like. So spoilers for if I ever cover that one, I guess. So what that all means is I'm giving this a series recommendation level of high. While its impact may be arguably low, it's got great art, great writing, and a great story. This is classic X-Men at some of its best. The collected edition gets 1. Colossus Oscar. A Colosker. Nope, not calling it that. But we are gonna call it a good thing. Sure, it pretty much just collects the 9 issues of the event, but it does have all the original covers in place and collects some bonus covers, and with 3 of those issues being giant-sized issues, this is really a lot of comic for one book. Thanks everybody for watching. Judging from my numbers, I'd say that none of you have any particular love of either X-Men or old comics, and this is both. So if you've actually made it this far, then an extra thanks to you. I just like mixing things up every now and then. I can't spend all my time on the new 52. And that said, I'm actually going to continue mixing things up for a while, covering hopefully a pretty wide range of comics over the next few months. So if that sounds good to you, or if you just want to make sure to stick around for the next time that I do cover a new 52 comic, make sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button and all that good stuff so you can make sure to be here next time, and I hope to see you then, right here in the Comic Cave.